All right, we lift off. Yes. Oh, he let you in. I told him not to, actually. You can leave it open now.
Okay.
You guys know when you know it?
No, it was after 7:30.
Oh, the clock says 7.
Yeah, well, I was going by the official time that I had.
My fault.
Yeah, we'll leave it open now. You can leave it open now. Everybody's in. Jeez.
You wanted to lock people out.
All right, talking about construction of DC motors. Constructions can almost be summed up, and it's very similar to a DC generator. It has a stator, the part that stays, which would be the part that stays in a DC generator.
Oh, magnet. That's
Yeah, field winding. Field winding. A rotor, which is the
Spinny thing.
armature. And let's see. It's worth noting that some motors actually use a permanent magnet instead of or in addition to an electromagnet. Very strong permanent magnet, by the way. Instead of or in addition to an electromagnet.
How strong is that permanent magnet, would you say?
Very. I've never broken one apart, but we could.
Or in addition?
Electromagnet. There we go. We have windings. Talk about the windings. Windings. Well, let's guess what they're going to be.
Series?
Series is one of them. Shunt wound will be another. And compound will be another. All right, talk about series. And this becomes a little bit more than just, I don't know, gee whiz, or just throwing notes around. There's actually a purpose behind this where it really matters. Not that you get to necessarily select a motor, but knowing what kind of motor you're messing with sometimes will prevent you from doing something stupid. Series wound, so coils are in series with the armature. All right. Since all current flows through the windings and the armature, it produces a lot of torque. So you got to think about a shunt wound. Current comes into the motor, right? Because it's not a generator, it's a motor. So you get the current coming in. It has two choices. It can go armature or field. Well, if it all mostly goes one way versus the other, then you have a strong magnet and not so strong magnet. But with a series, you got a it's equal, so strong and strong. So one series, since all current flows through I'll say field and armature, comma, this produces a lot of torque. A lot of torque. So I'm going to use this kind of motor where I need a high starting load. So used startup torque must be high. Where would I need a high startup torque? Starter. There you go. Must be high. That is to say, start with a load, so that would be starters, landing gear motors, not so much when the gear has to go down. It'll go down on its own. It's coming up is where it's difficult. What else do I have in here? Anything else? Or similar equipment. Those are my. I said or similar equipment. All right, but here's the point I love about this one: a series motor. Since it's designed with a high torque load and it's designed for a lot of torque, if you don't put a lot of torque on it, you get problems. So a series wound motor is susceptible to a runaway. Well, you remove the power, it won't. It's not like it's going to keep running on its own. But it's got to be limited to a certain RPM. And when you exceed the RPM limit of a motor, then the centrifugal forces in the motor tend to want to make it come apart. So you don't want to take a series wound motor, which would be something a mechanic would do, and just, I could just see that happening. We're having problems, the airplane doesn't want to start. You're like, well, just take the starter off the airplane, and put it on the bench, and you get a battery, and just click, and just watch it spin up. Now, there's nothing wrong with doing it if you hit it and it starts and you let the power off. But if you stick the power on there and just go, well, let's see what it does. Make sure it runs for a while. It's going to run for a little while. I don't think I would do that. Let's see, series. And so why? Why is it susceptible to runaway? Yeah, that's pretty much it. So I have some other notes. Let's see. Because counter EMF is needed to prevent excessive current flow, a series motor with no load will have low counter EMF and high current flow. Right. Glad you agree. I'll leave it at that. So be careful with that one. Shunt wound. Shunt wound. Well, obviously the field coils. The field is in parallel. Field is in parallel with the armature. I was just trying to cut out the word coils because I thought it would save time, and then I could move faster. But clearly, spelling C-O-I-L probably would have saved me a bunch of time at this point, and I wouldn't.
SeaWorld.
I was trying to, but now I'm not going to. So thank you. I will not SeaWorld. Let's see, field coils. Field coils. There we go. Must have resistance. Must have resistance since armature counter EMF will not affect field coils. C-O-I-L-S. There we go. Let's put that there. Coils. Just to make everybody happy. Coils. All right. All right. This can actually be done. You don't have to necessarily add resistors. This can be done. Can be done with many turns of fine wire. My bad. There we go. All right, but this relates to, or relates into low current flow, and weak startup torque. as armature gains speed, as armature gains speed, the armature current decreases due to counter EMF. So remember, you have to think that through. So remember we talked about that. So the armature is going to speed up. You have the current flowing into it. You have magnets. You've got your, I was trying to think, what was the spring on the video? Yeah, your dongle spring, which cuts across the lines of your dongle wand.
Is that the bushing?
Anyways, counter EMF builds up. It's like adding resistance, so it's actually putting the brakes on, so it keeps the motor from wanting to run away. Where am I at here? Armature gains speed. Armature current decreases due to counter EMF as it gains speed. Armature current. Armature current decreases due to counter EMF. Counter EMF. And field current increases. Field current increases. And that equalizes torque. Might be two. The increased field current causes more torque to equalize the counter EMF. I'll just write that. The increased field current. Sorry, field coil current. There we go. Field coil current. There we go. Causes field current. Causes more torque to equalize. Causes more torque to equalize the counter EMF. CEMF. But when the load is applied, so when a load is applied, the armature starts to slow down, right? Armature slows down, and we get a reduction and we get a reduction in CEMF through the armature, which allows more current to flow, which increases torque and brings the motor back to speed. To match the load, that's what I'll say. Increases to match the load. All right, because of the motor's ability to maintain a constant speed, like when it slows down, then the current starts flowing more, and then it matches the load. It's often called a constant speed motor. I don't call it that, but that's what the book says. So. Because of the shunt wound motor's ability to maintain a constant speed, it is called a constant speed motor. Again, never had anybody say that to me, so. So where is it used? Used where startup torque is low or high?
Low.
Low, but builds. Like fans, because once a fan gets going, then it has the load. I have boost pumps, because they start off easy, and then the load builds up on it. And that brings me to compound wound. Let's see. Kind of the best of both worlds, I guess, but not as much torque. So obviously has both series and shunt wound coils. What's the matter?
Alright, trying to figure out. So, use where startup torque is low, but builds what?
But builds. Period. But builds up. Startup torque is low, but then builds up. The startup torque builds, or not the startup, the torque builds, the needs of the motor. So when you first turn it on, the torque usage of it is low. It's not this big load, like a starter. The minute it engages, it's got to start turning the engine.
Yeah.
Okay, but this one where you would use a shunt wound where it does not have the high needs at first. But then as it gets going, it will build up, the torque can be built up on it.
What does it say?
Used where startup torque is low but builds.
But builds fans.
Those are examples.
Oh, okay. No, so I'm just reading it as like, but builds fans?
Sorry, I forget. I talk and you guys are sometimes 5 minutes behind me.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
Got it. Now it all makes sense.
All right. Well, hopefully. All right, combines both features of the compound wound and or of the both. All right. The example or so you have these are the what it combines. You have high start torque, but probably not as high as a series wound. Will not overspeed. Kind of the function of the shunt wound, but will decrease speed more than a shunt wound. Will decrease speed under a load more than shunt wound. So if you're going to stick your tongue against a fan blade while it's running, which motor would you most likely want?
Series one.
Shunt wound.
I think I would want the compound wound because it will decrease speed a little bit better. I would not want the series wound because it's got a lot of torque.
Right off that bat, you just have it right off.
Right off, just boom, and then,
Well, it depends on if you're a masochist or not.
yeah. Well, I'm assuming it's, yeah.
Try to masochism target.
Maybe you just don't want the taste of it.
All right. We'll do this. Used for loads that are variable. In the example that I got, hydraulic pumps. There we go. In addition to these, you can have brushless motors. Yeah, actually, that's kind of the new thing. Brushless, it's not the new thing, it's the latest thing. So it uses one permanent magnet instead of an electromagnet. So you don't have to transfer the energy to the rotating part. They are more efficient. More efficient, quieter, non-arcing, and more reliable. I don't know one.
Would you say there's not enough torque, or not as much torque as
I don't know.
something else?
I would assume that not as much torque, but I don't know. You know, magnets these days, they're really strong.
Yeah.
So I haven't heard anything negative about them. So
Good
my
thing.
favorite word, motor duty.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Let's see, let's cut out some writing. So reliable motor is very heavy to make a very good, long-lasting, solid American motor. It's super heavy. That is not what we want in an aircraft, super heavy. So to keep weight down, motors are operated at higher speeds and then higher frequencies, higher current, to try and get them to work, which causes the motor to heat up quickly. So motors are designed to only operate for a short period of time. Some of them are not. Some of them operate for a long period. But you know, like we talked about, landing gear, flat motors, things of that nature they weren't designed to just run continuously. You know, when the engineer thought about it, it's like, well, you're going to run the gear down. It's going to run for 30 seconds a minute, and well, you shouldn't really be running it again for a very long time. So it's going to cool all the way down, and you're going to run it again. So if you just sit there and run it back and forth, it's beyond what the engineers ever wanted it to do, and it is going to damage it. So, so motor duty. What can I say here about that? Motors have, let me see, time limits. Time limits. Just watch those time limits. If no time limit, it is a continuous duty. If you have a continuous duty, see a doctor. It's a continuous duty motor.
Lasting
Would that be a constant displacement?
We are children.
Yes, but unfortunately, my sense of humor never really evolved beyond that of probably a 13-year-old. Nothing funnier than a couple poop jokes.
Nothing funny on the fart and poop jokes.
If no duty, visit Taco Bell.
Okay, reversible motors.
What is that?
Can you just reverse the leads, make it go the other way?
Yeah.
All right, so I told you the story about how the 310 out there, the twin engine one, they hadn't really ran it, I think, since they moved it over here. It had been years and years, and it was just something that I really wanted to do. Is I don't like to see engines sitting, and I like to see things working and using. So, you know, I came up with this plan. Hey, we're going to start the 310. We're going to run it, and so I forget, did a bunch of prep work and got it all ready to run. I know I told you guys the story, but got it all ready to run. And so I had a student go out there and said, all right, go out there and put a battery in it, and then I'll get Phil, and we had another person who was a flight instructor, and he had done a lot of work on it. And I thought, you know, that's kind of the payback. You know, for doing all the work, you get to sit up front and start it. So have at it, you know, you guys have it. And I went back to my thing, and boy, they're just trying and cranking and cranking and cranking and cranking. And granted, it's a fuel-injected engine, so they're very difficult to start to begin with. You just run the fuel injectors, and if you get lucky, you get the right amount of fuel. If you don't, then you go, if it's too lean, it won't start. If you go too rich, then you just got to go through the rich start, the flood start, and then it starts, and then, anyway, it's complicated. So it's like, not this big deal it didn't start. It's like, well, you just got to get it right, and it hadn't started for a long time. And anyway, they cranked and cranked and cranked. I mean, the battery's just going dead. And kind of came along. I'm looking. Yeah, battery's dead. And I said to the student that hooked the battery up, well, go get the battery cart and plug it in. Just goes right underneath the wing, right next to the battery. So gets the battery cart and he pulls it out and he plugs it in. Comes back out of the wing. Goes, dude, it's arcing, man. He goes, whenever I try and hook up the plug, it just arcs all over the place. I said, well, that's kind of weird. Maybe the battery cart's backwards or something. I mean, that's, would make sense to me at that point. He's like, oh, okay. So he just went off and did his thing, and I kind of went back to do my thing, and came back a little bit. You get the battery cart plugged in? Yeah, man. I just swapped all the leads on the batteries, it plugged in, no arcing, no nothing. Kept cranking and cranking and cranking. Never could get it started that day. So clean up time, put everything away, pulled the battery cart back in. The tool room guy goes, "What'd you guys do with the battery cart, man? You got the leads all backwards." Because if you look at the end, it does have a positive and a negative, and you can kind of follow the lead and go, yeah, you got the negative to the positive to the negative. So I got the student, and I'm like, hey, you have the battery cart backwards, and so that means that if it was arcing, you must have put the battery in the aircraft backwards. And the 310 is just, and I can see why he did it. When I went and looked, it looked like one of the leads went to ground, but it didn't. And the one that does go to ground, you couldn't quite see where it went. So if you were careful and used a flashlight, it would have been obvious. But anyway, so the tour guy said, well, you bunch of dummies, you got the battery in there backwards, and you should have noticed the whole time that the propellers were going the wrong way. They don't work that way. Motors don't go backwards when you reverse the battery. They continue to go the right way. Or yes, somebody would have noticed, why is the propeller going backwards? But no, they were going to the right like they were supposed to. That's how nobody noticed it. So I tell you that story to tell you, can you just reverse the leads and make the props go backwards?
No.
No, you cannot. So why didn't it start?
Backwards battery.
The engine's turning the right way.
Yeah. Ohm's law.
Current's going the right way. Engine's turning the right way. Well, current's going the wrong way, but.
The school part?
Huh?
The school part?
Let's go through. What does it need to start?
Compression, fuel, spark,
Exhaust.
compression, fuel, spark.
Okay, so is it getting compression?
Yeah, pressure tested it, it was good, yes.
Is it getting fuel? It's Continental fuel injection system.
That's something you'd have to check there, but I'm sure Phil's a smart guy, he's probably getting fuel.
Yep, and you hit the boost pump and you can see fuel flow.
Okay.
So boost pump's working, fuel's going. It's an engine-driven fuel pump. You guys will figure this out next time. They know this over here, most of them.
Magnetos self-contained, so it should be.
Magnetos. Talk about magnetos. What do magnetos have to do to start? What do you need?
Enough RPM.
Grounded.
You need what kind of spark?
Hot spark and start.
Hot, late spark. Well, it provides a hot, late spark.
Impulse coupling.
What if I didn't hear it clicking?
Oh, that sucks.
Maybe they have a shower spark system.
So it's got a shower spark system.
Batteries backwards, probably the shower spark system.
And I don't think the shower sparks are working. That's my theory. The shower sparks just didn't like that.
Huh. Smart.
So shower sparks.
Yeah, nice.
We are learning.
What in the hell did you have for lunch?
That's KFC.
And speed? What?
Might be Mountain Dew.
A few diet pills over there or what? All right, reversible motors. So can you just reverse the leads? No, okay. So, but let's talk about the fact that you do have to have a reversible motor in a lot of applications. Flat motors, flaps got to go down, flaps got to go back up. Right? I don't want to have to get out and kind of. Landing gear, landing gears got to go down. Although some of you have designed landing gears, I've seen them that are both up and down at the same time. So we have that going. Let me see. So reversible motors. What can I say here? I'll just kind of move stuff around here. You cannot just reverse the leads. Leads to get a motor to reverse. Now you guys have had some experience with reversible motors, right?
Yeah.
Well, how many leads did you have on that?
3.
3. So you've got, and then if you remember now the drawing that came with that, you have a different wound field coil. So a field coil wrapped one way, field coil wrapped the other way. So it'll wrap one way, it'll round the other way. So reversible motors. Motors have, what do I want to write? A double winding. Have a double winding, or sometimes called a split field. Split field. So when power is applied to one coil, it turns one way. When power is applied to the other winding, it goes the other way. You've already seen that. And that's good enough for that. I'll make a note here. So sometimes, or clutch and brakes. Brakes. Some motors are designed with internal brakes to stop the motor in an exact spot. You get a lot of torque on a motor, you're like dropping landing gear or something. You don't want the landing gear, because remember the landing gear is heavy, so you got the weight of the landing gear coming down, the motor's kind of turning it, and when it comes down, it's got to stop right now. And if you've got a motor that kind of has to wind itself down, it's going to crack and break stuff. So it needs to stop now. So you can add in a brake system or get to a point where a clutch can release the motor. I think you'd have clutches on like autopilot servos. So to run an autopilot, you actually run a chain and a sprocket that's connected to your cables. So like in my airplane, you know, I'm going right and left. I got cables going out to the ailerons back and forth. And I've got a motor that's got a chain, like a bicycle chain, and a sprocket that's connected to those. Well, the last thing I want, you know, if I've got my autopilot on, I don't, you know, if I need to go right now, I don't have to turn it off and go. So it's got a clutch in there so I can override it. Or if it goes to the end or something, it'll override. So let me see. I'm going to put some motors use an internal brake and internal brake to stop the motor. Stop the motor. Let me see. Some motors have a clutch to disengage the load. Now I know is a good example of a clutch that disengages a load. Every one of you owns one of them.
Car.
What part of a car?
Clutch. Transmission.
No.
The compressor?
Yes, thank you. Air conditioning compressor.
Oh.
So you ever run your air conditioning compressor and you can, well, first of all, if you don't run it, the clutch is disengaged. Your engine is running and you got a belt that goes around the air conditioning compressor and you're not using it, it disengages it. Otherwise the compressor goes all the time. Or maybe you'll sit there and you hear it click on and click off, cycling. That's the clutch engaging to disengaging. There are many other things that we could go on about, such as how motors start, and I'll show you a couple of videos. You know, talk about air conditioners. Some motors have to have start capacitors. Without them, they just cannot start. So you need that start capacitor, and I'll show you a video that kind of explains why and such. I have, like, for whatever reason, because it's me, like 5 more pages of notes that look like this on AC motors. But we'll just watch a couple videos here, and we'll be good with that. But I brought some toys with. So
I've been waiting to see these.
you've been waiting to see them. All right. So if you want to sit there, wait. We'll have to have a break in a little bit. You come up and play with all these, or you come up here now. But these are just some of the things I inherited. This one's the nicest one looking, obviously. 2007. I think this was Al who made this one. This looks like something Al would have made. If you guys have never met Al, he's Al Thiel, I think is his name. You know? just one of the nicest guys in aviation. An older guy who was did something electronics his whole life, and then does ham radio. So this one actually doesn't work as well. Let's see, but it is labeled plus and minus. So let's see here.